The death of Isabella of Valois. Isabella of Valois, just 6 years old, was married to the 29-year-old widowed King Richard II of England in 1396, which is considered quite unsettling. She was the daughter of the King of France, Charles VI, and their marriage was primarily a political move to establish peace between England and France. Despite the discomfort of marrying such a young girl, Richard saw it as an opportunity to shape her into his ideal queen. However, they agreed not to consummate their marriage until Isabella turned 12, maintaining some level of decency even in those times. However, 12 today would still not be considered very decent. This was Richard's second marriage, as he had previously been married to Anne of Bohemia, who sadly died in 1394. Isabella was born on the 9th of November 1389 in Paris, France, as the third child and second daughter of Charles VI and the King of France, and his wife, Isabella of Valois. Sadly, her eldest sibling had already passed away before her birth, and the second eldest died the following year. Despite these losses, she had 9 younger siblings, 7 of whom survived infancy. Notably, 5 of her younger siblings were born after she was married off to England, and tragically one of them died while she was still there. In 1396, discussions began about marrying the 6-year-old Isabella to the widowed Richard II, the King of England, who was 22 years her senior, as a means to secure peace between their nations. Although concerns were raised about her age, King Richard argued that time would solve the issue, viewing her youth as an opportunity to mould her into his ideal queen. Isabella, described as pretty by English envoys, expressed her happiness about becoming Queen of England, believing it would elevate her status. She even started preparing for her new role. Richard travelled to Paris to fetch his bride amidst grand celebrations. The festivities continued in Calais, where the wedding ceremony took place on the 31st of October 1396. However, it was agreed that the marriage would not be consummated until Isabella reached her 12th birthday, and Isabella, with a sizable dowry and a suitcase filled with dollies, became Queen of England in 1397. She spent much of her short reign at Windsor Castle. Richard's reign ended tragically when he was deposed in 1399, leaving Isabella in a precarious position. She was placed under house arrest in Berkshire, and her situation worsened when Richard died in 1400. Isabella was, however, still an attraction as a royal spouse, and Henry IV wished to marry her to his son, who was near her own age. That boy would become Henry V, and also the inspiration for the Prince Hal in Shakespearean drama. To Isabella, however, the idea was abhorrent, and she refused to cooperate or even speak at court. She assumed Richard II was dead, which was indeed true by 1400. He'd either been murdered or had died after a self-imposed hunger strike while imprisoned at Pontefract Castle. Isabella's family in France campaigned for her return, but Henry IV would not allow it for several years. Eventually, she was allowed to leave England, and she was married to her cousin. It was in 1401 when she was allowed to return to France without her dowry and her marriage unconsummated. She later married Charles, Duke of Orleans, in 1407 at the age of 16, but she later died during childbirth just 2 years later. Charles Valois, the Duke of Orleans, wed Isabella on the 29th of June. It is said that she didn't want the marriage and that she cried throughout the entire ceremony. Isabella passed away after delivering a daughter in September of 1410, though some sources do suggest that it could have been 1409. Her death occurred in Blois, Anjou, France, when she was either 20 or 21 years old. Queen Isabella of Valois, a mere wisp of a woman at only 20, lay pale and breathless in the opulent chamber of the Blois chateau. The joy of childbirth, of bringing forth her daughter Joan, had been a flickering candle snuffed out by a sudden, relentless tide of weakness. Her ladies-in-waiting, their faces etched with grief, moved in a hushed ballet, their rich silks whispering against the polished oak floor. The once vibrant light in Isabella's eyes had dimmed, replaced by a heartbreaking stillness. News of the young queen's passing spread like a shroud through the castle, then rippled outward, carried on the wings of ravens to the court of France. A bride at 6, a queen at 7, Isabella's life had been a tapestry woven within the threads of political alliances. Married to King Richard II of England in a desperate attempt to forge peace, she had found herself caught in the machines of powerful men. When Richard was overthrown, Isabella, a pawn no longer of use, was returned to France, a solitary figure burdened by the weight of a crown that she no longer wore. Despite the turmoil of her short life, Isabella had found solace in the promise of motherhood, yet the cruel hand of fate had dealt her a final crushing blow. As the last vestiges of life ebbed away, a single tear traced a glistening path down her cheek, a silent testament to a life unfulfilled, a future stolen by the relentless march of time. Queen Isabella was dead, leaving behind a legacy of youthful beauty and tragic brevity. In a bizarre twist of fate, her second husband was taken hostage by the English after the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. He remained in captivity for 24 years, spending time composing poetry at various locations, including Pontefract Castle, where Richard II was said to have died.